It's such a thought process, this way of painting.
You can build up this sense of light and darkness through such a simple array of marks.
And it's so difficult actually to keep doing it.
Hi, I'm Annabel.
Hi, I'm Jo.
Today we're going to be exploring some of the techniques used by Neo-Impressionist painters. So the Neo-Impressionists are often better known as Pointillists. This refers to the point or the dot which they would use to make their paintings. However, it's a term that the artists themselves really didn't like.
Why didn't they like the term pointillist?
It wasn't really about the dot per se. And actually, Paul Signac, who was one of the key Neo-Impressionist painters, in his treatise in 1899 about the development of Neo-Impressionism, he rejected what he termed the critics' petty concern with dots. So for them, the dot was more about facilitating colour contrast than it was as a kind of aesthetic tool in and of itself.
So kind of like a means to an end to achieve their objectives.
Exactly.
With colour and line.
Exactly. So when the Neo-Impressionists started painting with this very kind of standardised brushstroke, many people believed that it was kind of the death of painting because people thought it was very mechanical and that there was a kind of formula that you could use. However, when we look at Neo-Impressionist paintings in real life, we can see that they actually adopted the dot with quite a lot of creativity and versatility. And if we look at a couple of examples here, we can see the different ways that artists were using this technique.
Yes, if we look at Jan Toorop here, you can see that there's quite a uniform use of the dot. And compare this to, say, somebody like Anna Boch, where we've got this very textured surface as the marks are being built up on top of each other to create this layering effect. And also the marks follow the direction of whatever object she's describing. For example, we've got the water here, and then we've got the reeds, which are vertical.
It's something you see a bit in the Van Rysselberghe picture we have here as well, where at the bottom of the canvas we have these quite horizontal marks, almost a little bit rectangular, a bit mosaic-like. But then when we see the way that he builds up the landmass in the background, there's a bit more movement to them. And then when we look at the sky, he kind of returns back to a more standardized, regular, almost atom-like use of the dot.
So now we're going to have a little think about some of the marks that have been made by the Neo-Impressionists by having a go ourselves. So let's see what happens. I've got two types of paintbrush here. I've got a tapered end paintbrush, which I wonder whether Toorop used to make those very uniform round marks. And also I've got a flat paintbrush here where you can see the bristles are sort of squished together to make a sort of rectangle shape. This type of brush was an invention during the 19th century with the invention of the metal ferrule here, which held the bristles in this way. So let's have a go. So we'll try the flatter one first. And then I wonder sort of whether we get some marks a bit like this, but you could maybe use the side, do you think?
So that kind of creates the more directional marks we were talking about.
Yeah, I think so. And then if we move along to the some more tapered brush, I wonder if we can sort of see if we can get a more uniform round mark. Possibly. And we do sometimes see, don't we, where you've got these like little dashes, you might also see a mark that way. Possibly if we change the colour, it might help us with that effect. Oh look, actually,
yeah.
that's quite like it, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so fascinating to think of how the tools that artists use affect the actual outcome of the work. It sounds obvious, but actually when you think about it, it really makes such a difference.
It does. And I think thinking about technique and materiality is so central when it comes to Neo-Impressionism.
Yeah, actually, by having a go at this, just makes me realise just how much commitment and how long it must have taken for the artist to create a canvas with these, really repetitive marks. So do you think that might be one of the reasons that some artists moved away from Neo-Impressionism in the end?
Totally. Some artists found the method both too time-consuming and also in a way limiting their creative expression on the canvas. Even though they found many different ways to use the techniques, for some people they just felt it was too much of a restriction. So many of the Neo-Impressionists, and Seurat in particular, were very invested in scientific theories of colour that were being developed in the 19th century. And here we have the colour wheel, and this one is Chevreul's colour wheel. The key thing that the Neo-Impressionists took from the colour wheel is this idea of complementary colours. So it's the colours that are opposite each other on the colour wheel.
And they have a very special job to do, don't they? When you put them together, they kind of react with each other and appear more vibrant. Is that right, or is that just too simplified version?
That's definitely what the Neo-Impressionists believed, and you see this in a lot of their paintings. You see the way they put blue and orange, or yellow and purple, or red and green dots next to each other, because they wanted to achieve the maximum luminous effect. Is this something you might be able to demonstrate?
Yes, I've already got blue here, so let's put some blue onto the paper here. And if we look at the colour wheel, this is a kind of, it's quite a warm blue. And if we look opposite, we've got a yellowy orange. So I'll put a yellowy orange going on. There we go. And then let's see what happens when they're placed next to each other. You get a sense of their reacting and becoming a little bit brighter. So what the Neo-Impressionists were intending to do was to create a sensation where the colour was mixed not by the artist on the palette, but by the viewer's eyes looking at the painting.
Yeah, optical mixture is an interesting theory, and it's been kind of argued in both ways, that it sort of works and or it doesn't work. And one of the joys of seeing these paintings in real life is also being able to kind of test out the theories behind them. So if we come back to Van Rysselberghe's coastal scene, could you talk a bit about how the Neo-Impressionists would use tone to create depth and dimension on their canvases?
Yes, so we've got a really lovely example of the use of chiaroscuro using tone. And what I noticed with this painting is that we've got dark tones, midtones and sort of highlights, and the dark tones seem to be in sort of the blues and greens. I'm going to try and keep using the marks that Van Rysselberghe may have used. And it's so difficult actually to keep doing it. But we've got this dark blue. So where we've got the sort of dark, where the shadows would be, we've got these darker tones of the greens and the blues. And then the darker green as well. And I suppose here really what he's hoping to create is the sort of shimmering effect of the light hitting the water, isn't he? Yeah. And then I'm going to add some white to the tones, to this blue and green.
It's amazing to see the way that you can build up this sense of light and darkness through such a simple array of marks.
It's such a thought process, this way of painting. Okay, and then we're going to build up with the really lightest tones. This to create this sort of shimmery effect. Obviously, given more time, we would build up this lovely sort of textured surface, which Van Rysselberghe has in his painting. And then this is okay. It's all right, but it's not hugely vibrant. And this is where he then uses these complementary colours, because what he does is adds in some complementaries of the lighter tones. So, for example, the complementary of the green might be kind of a sort of a lighter reddy pink.
Even just a couple of marks makes such a difference.
It does, doesn't it? And also the other thing is, it's quite difficult to see, isn't it, when you're close up, is that working as the object that you want to describe, and you have to sort of stand back from it to get a real idea of the sense of form and depth within the painting. So it must have been a real sort of dance between working so very closely with these tiny dots and then moving back to sort of take in the whole of the image.
We can take a look at some of Seurat's paintings now. Here we have one of his Graveline pictures, which he painted in the summer of 1890, and Chahut, which is one of Georges Seurat's most prominent large-scale canvases. One of the things that I find really interesting about these works is the way that Seurat paints borders around his works. You can see here with Chahut, this dark blue border, and it's filled with little orange dots, kind of surrounds the painting. And same here with the Graveline as well, this mix of blue and orange dots. And it's interesting because you can see the way not only that he paints this dotty border, but also that he changes it according to the tones on the interior of the picture.
I find this painting so fascinating because going back to the use of complementaries, when you see it in the flesh, this purple and yellow is so vibrant. It was really interesting for me to find out about Seurat's palette. What I found fascinating was the way he set it out with the colours down one side, and then next to each colour you've got a little blob of white to change the tone, but without spoiling the intensity or the purity of the colour.
Yeah, it's very methodical, it's very systematic. When you look at some other artist palettes, they're nowhere near as neat as this one.
They aren't, are they?
So as well as focusing very intensely upon the brushstroke, Neo-Impressionists were also, of course, thinking about the composition of their paintings. And we see this shift in their work towards an increasing formal simplification. So, for instance, if we take this work, maybe, by Toorop, the work is essentially made up of these bands of sky, the kind of horizon, the sea, and then the beach. And they kind of exist as these strips on the page there. Even the shell gatherer himself is sort of essentialized into this very minimal figure.
I love this because it's almost like the form is dissolving slightly, isn't it? It is very simple, isn't it? But it's just so effective.
Yeah, and as you say, there's still like rhythm in the painting through those forms in the sky, but it also feels very quiet and very tranquil.
What I find really interesting is this sort of the simplification of the form in terms of the design, and does it reflect in some way what was going on at the time in sort of design, sort of with like posters, and also it kind of makes me think of the flatness of Japanese prints. Is that something that they would have been influenced by?
Totally, yeah. I mean, Seurat in particular, he had this real fascination with posters and advertisements. And as you say, some aspects of Chahut really speaks to that, like the kind of extreme flatness of the painting and the use of generic types or kind of caricatural figures really comes from his love for this kind of seductive visual language. We also know that Japanese woodblock prints were in wide circulation in the European capitals in the late 19th century, and we know that Impressionists and Neo-Impressionists alike looked at these works. Neo-Impressionism as a movement was relatively short-lived. It only really ran from the mid-1880s up until the turn of the century, but it had a big impact on the avant-garde art of the early 20th century.
And the effects can be still felt today. In fact, if you come to the gallery, you'll see a contemporary piece of artwork by the artist Bridget Riley, where she uses shape and colour, and particularly colour theory that was used by the Neo-Impressionists to create her abstract pieces of work, which really use colour to create a sense of dynamism and movement.
It's been so interesting to see you put Neo-Impressionist techniques into action today.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your insight into the way that they worked and the context in which they worked. Because I think what we have realised together today is just how difficult it is to create these pieces of work, how much commitment you need to your ideals to see it right the way through. And in the process, create these absolutely stunning pieces of work that really are vibrating with light and colour.